Hi guys! So today I want to cover Hersheypark in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And I'm going to be covering how plus size friendly the park is, plus size, bigger people, size friendly the park is. And just to go ahead and give you a perspective, me personally, I am 5'6". I weigh around 280 pounds when I visited, and most of my weight is carried in my stomach, with some weight in my thighs and hips. I do not have a big chest or bust area. And of course, height, I'm not, I'm average height, so I'm not very tall. But just keep that in mind when I'm describing the rides in the video, how they fit me. I'm going to be going in depth over every ride at Hersheypark, including in the water park, the boardwalk section, just of how they fit a plus size rider, just giving you an idea. I know how intimidating it can be when you go to a theme park and you're scared to ride stuff. You don't know how things are going to fit. So I hope if you're visiting Hersheypark, planning on it, that this can ease some of those nerves. And while I'm doing this, if you have any other theme park that you were wondering about plus size, let me know in the comments below, because I've been to several theme parks. I love theme parks. And I can definitely see if that's one of them I visited and maybe give you some insight on them. And if you have any more questions about Hersheypark as I'm going through this, just leave those comments below and I'll definitely try to answer them as soon as I can. Because I know it can be scary as a plus size person, thinking you're not going to fit on a ride, you're not going to have a good time, and I'm here to ease those fears. The thing I have noticed, even as a plus size person, any theme park I go to, there's always something I can do, and there's usually always a roller coaster I can do, which is a great feeling. And Hersheypark is a great family friendly park. If you have kids, I'm sure you'll be traveling here with your kids. I do not have kids. But I'm still going to go over the kids' rides, how I think you might fit, because I'm sure you want to ride them with your kids. Um, so, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it, and we'll start with the roller coasters. First up, we're going to talk about SkyRush, which is currently the tallest coaster at Hersheypark. It was built by Intamin, and bigger people familiar with Intamin knows Intamin tends to not be very accommodating for bigger people at all. One of the worst, if not the worst. This ride, the way the restraints are, maybe you can tell in the picture, it's going to come down over your thighs and perhaps hit your tummy depending on how big it is. Um, there is a test seat out front of this ride to try before you get on. And if you do have bigger thighs, not only will the restraint crush those thighs, but they could prevent the restraint from closing altogether. I tried out the test seat. I think I was pretty close to fitting, but didn't quite make it on this ride. So that was, definitely a disappointment for me. But if you carry your weight, like, in your chest area, and maybe not really your thighs, but even if you do have some stomach weight, I still think you should be able to get on because of how the restraints are designed. But again, with the test seat out front, definitely try this coaster out with the test seat before waiting in line and then maybe possibly not being able to fit. Next two are also Intamin's coasters. We have, here pictured, we have Fahrenheit and Storm Runner. They both have the exact same restraint system, so I included them together. These two, let's see. One of them, the two has oh, actually, no. Well, no, that's right. Sorry. Well, no, I'm sorry. They both have test seats. Both Fahrenheit and Storm Runner had test seats. For a minute, I was thinking that Storm Runner didn't, but Fahrenheit did. But they both have test seats out front to check them out. These restraints are a lot like Maverick at Cedar Point style restraints, if you've ever been to Cedar Point. Pretty much the same type of restraints. I'm pretty sure they're similar to Intimidator 305 at King's Dominion as well. I feel like Hershey actually tightened these tighter than they're made to be for whatever reason. So at my current stats, I was able to get on both of these with some great help. A little pushing. I had difficulty. I'm not gonna lie, because my stomach mainly was what's causing me difficulty on these, because they have the over shoulder restraint, which if you're smaller, it's probably gonna hit right on you, not gonna cause a big problem, but it'll hit like more on your more with your chest area. If you're smaller in the stomach, that might cause the issue, but when you're bigger in the stomach and not really in the chest area, your stomach causes an issue with over-the-shoulder restraints. So at my current size, I was able to ride both, but it was extremely tight. So definitely, guys, use those test seats before you try to ride. Next up here is Comet, currently the oldest roller coaster still at Hersheypark. Built by Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters. If you have any experience with Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters, they're all pretty universal and similar unless they put a different company's trains on there, which is highly unlikely since they're actually still around and making trains. Other coasters Philadelphia Toboggan Company makes would have been Blue Streak at Cedar Point, the Racer, or some of the Woodstock Expresses you see at Cedar Fair Parks. Those are some good examples. It's going to have a seat divider down the middle. And if you have big hips, you may be squished or have some difficulty getting in. I found that, yeah, I was a little squished, but it wasn't uncomfortable by any means. You should not have an issue with the lap bar. Even me with my bigger stomach didn't have a big issue with the lap bar at all. So really, your only problem's probably going to be your hips. And it is pretty smushy. A tip, though, is if you think it might be too smushy, don't ride with somebody next to you if you can help it. And that'll definitely help, because then you won't have another person really pressing back on the seat. And sometimes that can help with room. Currently the only B&M coaster in the park. It is an inverted B&M. It is known as Great Bear. This coaster, I do fit, requires some stapling in, and help from ride operators. It's an over-the-shoulder restraint. If you're exceptionally tall, you might have issues with it. If you have really big chest, you may have issues, or a really big stomach. My issue comes in the stomach, and if you have really big hips, sometimes you can't scoot all the way back in the seat, so that can affect it closing. There are going to be 1 or 2 rows of where they have the longer seatbelt on this coaster, which can make all the difference between fitting or not. There is a test seat out front for you to check out. Don't be ashamed to check it before you get in line and wait. This is not the best style B&M restraints. This is an older style B&M. This isn't one of the newer B&Ms that are out there. So yeah, just check out the test seat and be wary that if you have a really big gut or big chest, you could potentially have some problems getting on this ride. Next up is SooperDooperLooper, the Schwarzkopf coaster in the park. This coaster, you'll be happy to know, even though it goes upside down, it doesn't have over-the-shoulder restraint. It just has a lap bar. Each seat has its own lap bar. You got to be able to fit your knees in between the lap bar. This one was really easy to get on. Didn't have an issue with it whatsoever. Found it pretty accommodating. If you do have really big hips, you might want to try to ride by yourself just to give you some more extra room. but I don't think a lot of people are going to have many issues on SooperDooperLooper. Next up, we have Sidewinder, which is a Vekoma boomerang coaster. You're going to sit down, and there is an over-the-shoulder restraint. And they have replaced it with the new style over-the-shoulder restraint. So they're more comfortable than they used to be. For bigger people, I didn't really have an issue with this at all. I don't think many people, bigger people will. Possibly if you have a really big chest or really big gut, because it is an over-the-shoulder restraint. That's just the nature of the restraint style, that it can be kind of a little constricting. And the seats, I didn't find them to be too squishy overall, but for your comfort, you can try to ride by yourself. But I felt like there was adequate room in this. Hips, again, I felt like there was adequate room. I mean, I do have pretty large hips. I mean, not a large butt, but large hips, which I feel like sometimes helps. It's just to have one or the other instead of having both. But overall, shouldn't be an issue on this coaster at all. And if you've ever rode another Vekoma, um, whether it be a boomerang or just maybe like a Vekoma Flying Dutchman, then you're going to know the restraint styles, how it fits, and it's pretty much just the same for here. Next up here is Laff Trakk at Hersheypark. As you can tell by this picture of the seat restraints, each person has an individual lap bar, and the seats are kind of curved around you. It's an indoor, like, spinning coaster is what it is. Some interesting theming, for sure. This coaster, I was not able to ride. Like, I was super close, but the problem, I couldn't get my hips all the way back in the seat because of how it's curved in design. This is an extremely snug coaster. If you have a big gut, or if you have relatively big hips or butt, you're going to have issues with this coaster for sure, unfortunately. And it's one of the newer coasters there too. There is a test seat at the entrance to this coaster. I highly recommend you test it out before getting on, which is what I did, and then I didn't even bother getting on the ride, because with somebody pushing on me, I still had difficulty. I mean, it was close, but it just wasn't happening. If I could have been able to scoot back more, then it probably would have happened. If you're smaller than me or don't have a problem with your butt and hips or gut, you should be fine on this ride. But again, just check out the test seat out front. Next up, we have the Wild Mouse Coaster, which I'm like 90% sure that it's a shared lap bar per seat. What I did to be more comfortable was to ride my own seat, and it was able to fit. This is more like a family style coaster. The seats aren't that bad and to fit in. There's no test seat out front, but if you fitted like any other type of Wild Mouse coaster, you should be okay. The lap bar didn't have to come down as far, which helped me. Plus, sitting by myself in a seat helped as well, and that's what I'd recommend for you too, if you have any doubt about fitting. Next, we have Trailblazer by Aerodynamics. Mine Train type coaster. So if you're familiar with the Mine Train type coasters, this coaster is going to be super accommodating for you. Individual lap bars, and I do believe seat belts for each seat. Seat belts should be super long, no issue there. I've heard that people have issues if they're really tall on this ride. But other than that, Trailblazer is super accommodating. I wouldn't be scared to ride it. And by the off chance if you are a little smushed, it's not a super long ride. So you wouldn't have to suffer for too long. But overall, I don't foresee many, if any, problems with Trailblazer. The last coaster that Hersheypark has is the Coco Cruiser. It's a family coaster, and this coaster I have not rode, but judging by the look of it, it looks extremely small. It's nothing really thrilling. I think the height's only like 12 feet or something like that, but if you have a kid, they would definitely love it. Um, it looks like it would be very hard to squeeze into and ride with your kid. Another consideration, not only that, but it's a shared lap bar with you and your kid. If you are significantly bigger than your kid, the kid might not feel like they're safe or could possibly slide around. And then you deal with the issue of not even really fitting beside your kid, too. So if I was a bigger person and my kid really wanted to ride, I'd see if my kid meets the height requirement to ride by themselves, or perhaps bring another family member to ride with the kid on this particular ride. Next up, we have the Hershey Triple Towers. It's a set of 3 different drop tower rides, each one shorter than the other, until we get to the tallest one. I didn't ride this mainly because I hate drop towers with a passion. Doesn't matter the height, it can be short, tall, I don't like them at all. Um, the restraint system is going to be pretty much like other drop towers that you may have seen, with an over-the-shoulder restraint. There is a test seat out front to test it out to see whether or not the ride will be able to accommodate you, which I highly recommend. Again, with an over-the-shoulder restraint, you may encounter issues if you have a really large belly or large breast. But if you've rode other drop towers, then should fit. And this one is by S&S. So a little bit different than the Intamin, but it should be more forgiving than the Intamin drop towers. Here we have the Claw, which is a thrill ride at Hersheypark. You're going to be in an individual seat in a set of 4, and it's like a giant swing pendulum ride. The restraint's an over-the-shoulder restraint that will buckle, and I was actually just one click away from fitting. Like, I was super close. They tried, but unfortunately it just wasn't happening for me. But I think my problem is my stomach. If you have a problem with your stomach, if you have a problem with a big bus, it could potentially cause you some issues not fitting on this ride. There is no test seat, but if you think you may fit, go ahead and give it a shot, and hopefully you do. This is Coal Cracker, which is a typical log flume ride that they have. There's no weight requirements. Anybody should easily be able to ride this with no issue, no matter your size. And you can ride with your family too. The next ride I'd like to talk about is called Frontier Flyers. Frontier Flyers, um, it can seat up to 2 to a seat. Recommended, because the seats aren't huge, would be just an adult and a child. And if I am correct, there is going to be a seatbelt that goes across both of you. But the number one thing here is the combined weight of riders cannot exceed 340 pounds. But it shouldn't be an issue as far as fit goes. I feel like the seatbelt's pretty long. It's just the weight limit here. This ride here is called Music Express. Here's like a detailed image of what the seats look like. This is a Himalaya type ride. And it just has a bar that pulls towards you. There's no weight limit on this ride. I feel like this ride is very accommodating. I don't think you should have an issue on this ride whatsoever, but do realize if you're riding with somebody smaller, the bar basically will come down on both of you. So that may freak out littler kids, maybe. But the seat is pretty deep, so that might not even be too big of an issue here. for Music Express. This is Pirate, which is basically a pirate ship like swinging back and forth boat ride. It has a single lap bar that comes across the whole row. I felt this ride is pretty accommodating. Don't see many people having an issue unless you have an exceptionally large gut. But most people shouldn't have an issue at all on this ride. This ride here is called Skyview. It's like a like Skylift kind of ride. And the main reason I want to talk about this ride more in depth is because on their website, I like to look at the website of places about the ride just to get more info, like the specific weight limit or any specific details, and make sure like that I have, because it'll tell you if there's a test seat out front, make sure I have all the test seats right and stuff like that. Because sometimes I can't remember it all. I've been to so many different parks, it can get kind of confusing. On their website, it says this ride may not accommodate guests of a larger size, height, or weight due to the configuration of the safety restraint system. And here I have a closer up picture of the safety restraint system, what it actually looks like in depth. The for real reason that I can maybe see that warning being there, because I didn't personally have really, I don't think I had any issues on this whatsoever. If you have a really big gut, it could push against the bar, but I think the main issue, because of how the restraint system is your thighs. If you can tell how your legs come out, it could hit against your thighs, maybe not even close. I have pretty decent sized thighs, and it touched them, but I liked that it touched because I felt like I was more secure. But if you do have really big thighs, maybe that could prevent you from fitting. But other than that, I think you should be okay on this ride for the most part. Next up, we have Wave Swinger, which is like a swing type style ride that Hersheypark has. This ride, it has a weight limit per seat of 300 pounds and cautions that due to your size that you may not fit. I rode it and I didn't have an issue. So I personally don't see size being an issue on this particular ride. I just feel like the only problem for bigger people is going to be the weight restriction on the Wave Swinger. This ride here is called the Twin Turnpike, the Speedway part of the Twin Turnpike. They call it Twin Turnpike because there's also an antique cars part, but this is just going to focus on the Speedway part. As pictured here, these are the style ride vehicles you would ride in. If you're tall, you're going to have issues with this ride. If you're bigger, I feel like you'll be okay, but you might want to ride by yourself. Riding with somebody, it's going to be extremely smushy, extremely tight. But you can ride this by yourself. You don't have to have a kid ride or whatever. If you do ride with a kid, just know it may be pretty tight unless you ain't that big. The kid ain't that big either. But just a word of warning on the Twin Turnpike Speedway. Next up is their Scrambler. Their Scrambler here, it's just like a traditional Scrambler. If you've ever rode them, they're pretty much all the same. No really big differences between them. There is a shared seat belt that goes across all members of the car. I found it to be pretty long. Both me and my fiance were able to ride together, and we're both bigger people. And we still had slack on the seatbelt, so I don't think the seatbelt length should be a problem here. I think most people are going to be absolutely fine riding the Scrambler, no matter your size. But if you are concerned, you can always ride by yourself. The following list of rides and attractions should be very accessible to us bigger people, regardless of our size. Those attractions and rides include the Whip, the Twin Turnpike Classic cars, which is like the antique cars, the Howler, Whirl, Teacups, the Monorail, Derry Dip Fun Slides, the Kissing Tower, Fender Bender, which is bumper cars, the Dry Gulch Railroad, the Carousel, and the Starship America. Although I would caution you, if you do ride Starship America, to ride by yourself, because it's just just the design of the ride vehicles. They aren't that big, but you should be able to fit just fine. The next few rides I'm going to name are not accessible at all for us bigger people. This is not because of our size. This is simply because they're kiddie rides and can only accommodate up to a certain height, and we're going to be above that height. Those rides include Balloon Flight, Busy Bees, the Dinosaur Go Round, Dizzy Drums, Granny Bugs, Helicopters, Livery Stables, the Mini Pirate, the Mini Scrambler, the Pony Parade, the Red Baron, and Sweet Thing. The next few rides and attractions require that you go with a kid to ride them, and since I fortunately don't have a kid, I haven't been able to ride them. But I'll definitely try to give you my best insight on each of these rides and details on the rides. The first one here pictured is Convoy, and again, you do have to have a kid to ride. The kids would most likely ride in the actual vehicle part, and you'd probably ride in the back of the vehicle. I don't think that would be an issue because the back is just a simple bench seat, so that shouldn't be an issue at all. Unless you're really tall, then your knees could possibly hit against it. But other than that, you should be able to ride this with your kid if you wanted to. This next ride is called Frog Hopper. And again, unless further noted, that you can ride with your kid, but you have to accompany a child to ride these rides. On their website, it says that this ride only seats 2 guests taller than the Twizzlers height category, which is from 54 to 60 inches. So if you're taller than that, it only seats 2 guests, and you have to sit in the center seats. The next thing to note about this is there is just, it looks like one straight bar that goes across everybody. This could be an issue if you are bigger because your stomach and your legs. This looks like it would be an extremely hard ride to get onto unless you're super skinny and small. So, and plus the seats look very small. So I definitely don't recommend trying this if you are a bigger person. This ride here is called Ladybug. You can ride with your kid. Have to have a kid to ride, but you can ride with your kid, and I don't foresee this ride giving too many issues to too many people. The only issues I could for real see is if you have a really big gut, you may press against that center tabletop-like thing. But other than that, you should be okay on the Ladybug. This is the Mini Himalaya. Again, you have to have a child. You have to be accompanying a child, one adult per child. And the bar is not going to be the issue here. The issue here for fitting is going to be that there's a seat belt. I don't know how long the seat belt may be. I really don't know anything about it. As I said, I haven't rode these rides. So all I can tell you is from what I've seen or what I'm gathering online about it. And I'm assuming the seatbelt wouldn't be that long because it is designed more as a kiddie ride. So if you're wary, maybe just let your kids go by themselves on this one. Next up, we have Space Age, and by their website requirements and guidelines, it can only seat 4 guests taller than the Hershey's Milk Chocolate Bars category per ride cycle, which would be taller than 54 inches. And you must sit in the red or blue spaceships if you're wanting to ride with your kid. And it looks kind of like a smushy ride. It looks like it's going to be uncomfortable for tall people, especially, and bigger people. I wouldn't recommend it unless you aren't that big. Or, I mean, if you want to try it, again, you're more than welcome to try it. It just doesn't really look that accommodating at all. This ride here is called Sweet Swing. I've already mentioned a ride called Sweet Thing, which, if you're a bigger person, just because of height, you can't ride Sweet Swing. or Sweet Thing you cannot ride. Sweet Swing, however, you are allowed to ride, but the thing of it is you can tell there's one lap bar that goes across the whole row. Doesn't adjust for individual people. It's going to be really smushy on bigger people for your thighs and your stomach, especially hips, because the seats are only so wide, because this is a kiddie ride. This is designed for kids, and if you're over 6 feet tall, you cannot ride either. So definitely wouldn't recommend this one. Here is Tiny Tracks, and if you are above 54 inches tall, you may not sit in the engine or caboose, which they're both like enclosed, and you're gonna bump your head because you're gonna be too tall. And one companion may accompany each child. You sit in these seats here, and this is a really good picture because it shows the seats. The seats shouldn't be an issue. There is a seat belt, which I'm not 100% sure how long it is, or much about the seat belt, so that might be something to ask when you get there, or just try it. I believe I saw a couple bigger people riding this because I did walk past this when I was at Hersheypark, and bigger-ish, not like huge, but bigger-ish. So this actually, you may be okay on this ride. Alright, this ride here is called Traffic Jam. This is also going to be the last ride I'm going to talk about in the main park before moving on to the water park. And this ride, it can only accommodate 2 guests taller than 54 inches. And you have to sit in the fire trucks, as pictured here. And my guess would be, if you're really tall, you may have some issues, or there may be a seatbelt on this. It may be issues. I don't know a whole lot about this ride, but I do know you have to sit in the fire trucks, and it can only accommodate 2 adults over 54 inches tall and you can only ride with your kid on this ride. Guys, we are now going to move on into the Boardwalk at Hersheypark, which is their water park that is included with summertime admission to Hersheypark. The main thing to watch out with in the water park, it's not going to be how big around you are. How big around you are, just going to go out the door. Does not matter. What is going to matter is your weight a lot in the water park. From my experience, they don't actively weigh you. I don't know if that has changed, but this is the same with most. They don't actively weigh you. However, it is a good rule of thumb to follow the guidelines. They are there for a reason. The rate requirements and limits are there for your safety. They are not there just to say, well, if you're above this, you shouldn't be riding. We just don't like you. They're there for a reason. Could be manufacturer, suggested weight, whatever. The only reason that I would tell you to ever overload the weight, and this is not even, I wouldn't recommend it. I'm not saying to do it at all, but this is what I tell people about the weight limits. The slides or rides or whatever can usually handle much more than the weight limit. And some people, I think you'd be fine if, say the weight limit is 250 pounds, and you know normally you're right around 248, 249. You're normally under it, but say you ate a lot. You're at 251 pounds. You should be fine. It's not a huge deal, but if you purposely know that you're way over the weight limit, just don't do it. It's not very smart. It's there for a reason. Anyway, let's continue on to talking about the actual rides, and this ride that you've been looking at for a while now is called Wave Rider. It's like a wave simulation, surfing kind of simulation ride. Again, size ain't going to matter, but there is a weight limit of 350 pounds per guest on this. So just be mindful of that weight limit there. Next up, we're going to have Bayside, Pier, and East Coast Waterworks. These are both interactive, like play structures, play areas, environments. And they have slides, like water features, the little fountains, geysers. They're more aimed at families, especially families with kids. However, anybody's allowed on them. The only thing that's going to have a weight limit is the slides on both play structures, on both Bayside Pier and East Coast Waterworks. There is going to be a 300-pound weight limit on all of the slides. I know for a fact they don't weigh you here, though. So if you know you're 299 and maybe actually be 301 that day, it's not something to sit and worry about. You're going to be okay. It's going to hold you. But if you're knowingly above the weight limit, I wouldn't recommend going above that. But you won't have an issue with fit or anything on either of these, though. This is the new Breaker's Edge water coaster. They just brought it in this year, or this past year of 2018, for the water park. You sit one in front of the other, and the requirements of this ride is the whole, all of the seats. The total weight has to be between 100 and 700 pounds. Have to have at least, pretty sure I have to have at least 2 guests on there. So that gives up to about, if you're going to split it evenly, 350 pounds a guest. But just letting you know about that. So, but it's a super fun ride if you can ride, or I highly recommend to check out this roller coaster. This is called Wildcat Racer, which is the longest mat slide in the world, and you lay on your stomach going down the slide. And this will have no problems fitting you no matter how big around you are. However, it's to be noted that there's a 300-pound weight limit per person on this slide. But other than that, Whitecap Racer should be perfectly fine to do. This here is called Tidal Force, which I meant to put when I was doing the regular rides, but I guess I missed it. This is actually technically located in a boardwalk area of the park. However, you can wear regular clothes to ride Tidal Force, much like you can with the Coal Cracker. It says online that it may not fit certain people because if they're exceptionally large. However, I don't feel like that would be an issue whatsoever on this ride. I feel like it's super accommodating, bench type seating, but I really don't see many, if anybody, having an issue on Tidal Force. This is Coastline Plunge, which is a complex, has 6 different slides. Each slide is different. They're all pretty kind of different from each other, offer a unique ride experience. On Coastline Plunge slides Hydro, Pipeline, Riptide, and Vortex. The maximum weight capacity is going to be 250 pounds on a single tube, or for 400 pounds on a double tube. On Coastline Plunge Surge and Whirlwind, the maximum weight is 400 pounds on a double, and single tubes or single riders aren't allowed on those 2 slides. As far as concern about your body size, that's nothing to worry about here. Just remember those weight requirements for the slides. They're going to be posted at the entrance for you as well, in case you forget which is which. The very last 2 rides I'm going to talk about is going to be the Shore, which is a wave pool, and Intercoastal Waterway, which is a lazy river. These 2 rides are accessible to anyone. Does not matter your size, your weight. Anybody is going to be able to enjoy these 2 rides with no issues fitting. As you can tell, Hersheypark does have stuff for us bigger people to ride. There's going to be rides that us bigger people can for sure ride at Hersheypark. And again, the statistics on this video, as far as size and fit, for reference for me, I'm 280 pounds, biggest in hips, thighs, and especially biggest in my stomach. And I do feel like us bigger people, but we might not be able to ride everything in the park. There's still going to be plenty at Hersheypark for us to enjoy. And I found for most parks, that there is always going to be some stuff for us to do, and even a roller coaster to ride as well, which is awesome. So you're not just stuck, maybe just riding like the train or whatever. If you do have any more questions about Hersheypark, how plus size friendly it is, or you need more details on a ride, just comment down below and I'll get to it as soon as I can to try to help you out with those questions. And I thank you so much for watching.